Welcome to Recogs, the inventory success podcast where we discuss how the top operators source, manufacture, finance, and sell their inventory in order to create successful businesses. I'm your host, Mike Gelb. I'm the community manager here at MFD. MFD is the inventory success platform where we help consumer and B2B companies. What do we mean when we say inventory success? Well, we help SMBs manufacture, finance, and distribute their products across 20 categories. If you're looking for help reducing your COGs, or you're looking for inventory financing help and selling into new channels, we're happy to see if we can help at manufactured.com. Now, I know this is a free podcast, but it doesn't mean we don't have a favorite. If you're enjoying the show, if you can please subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you're listening so you don't miss the next one, that'd be amazing. Our guest today is Troy Bonde, who is the CEO and co-founder of Sazh. Sazh is a new generation of tomato sauce that is offering bold, curated flavors and made with the freshest ingredients. We discuss the inspiration for starting a pasta company, his approach to building and sourcing the freshest products for his different product lines, and how he went slow when it came to distribution, but then fast, and why they did that strategy. Also, his thoughts around future growth. Without further ado, here's Troy. Troy, thanks so much for your time, for coming on. I know we've chatted in the past few weeks, and so much exciting things going on with Sazh. How are you doing? Are you sleeping?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I joke that it keeps me up at night, but gets me up in the morning too, right? I think I said that to you last time we spoke. So it definitely wakes me up, but it's exciting. A lot of fun.
So exciting. So exciting. I mean, it's just amazing what you and Winston have both built. But let's actually start from the beginning though. What inspired you both to start Sazh? You and Winston, how did you both meet? And what was kind of the influence with the brand's development?
Yeah, we've known each other forever. Our parents grew up together, grandparents knew each other. From the same hometown, went to middle school together. And when COVID hit, we were actually at USC in college together. We were sent home. And we started our first year. We were really bored, honestly, at home. It was online class. We weren't going to much class, to be honest with you. I was interning at a merchant bank at the time, and Winston was in real estate. We were sophomores, and we'd started a business. It's a long story that I won't get into, but we were sourcing a hand sanitizer dispenser with a built-in infrared thermometer from Shenzhen, China. So you could take your temperature, it would display it. You could sanitize your hands simultaneously, and we got very lucky. We were effectively drop shipping the product, didn't hold any inventory. We would cold email school districts, 12 hours a day, draft them all day, all night, send them out at 8 a.m. in the morning. And we found ourselves, Winston's dad had a little office here in Pasadena in our hometown, and we would sleep in the office. I would sleep on the couch. He would sleep on the floor, and we would cook pasta on a single stovetop burner, like 5 nights a week. It was quick, it was relatively cheap, it was easy, and, we'd go to Whole Foods in Pasadena, we'd walk in, and to get to the pasta sauce aisle, we'd walk by beverage, and we'd stop and we'd look at Olipop, we'd look at Poppi, we'd pick up a Sanzo, and, those brands to us would elicit this emotional response. I think as 2 young consumers that really as we kind of go down every subcategory of grocery, we'd feel the same way. And we'd get to pasta sauce, coincidentally, the one category we were shopping. And it was like, everything here is kind of old Italian, tan label, cursive writing, nothing wrong with it. There are a lot of great brands, but it felt like there hadn't been that brand disruption, like communicatively to a younger consumer that we'd seen cross category. And on the flip side, then we would kind of defer to flavor. And everything was marinara, arrabbiata, pomodoro, tomato basil, roasted garlic, right? It felt like there was no meaningful differentiation as, a value proposition to us as 2 young consumers. So, it was really a lucky break during COVID and starting our first business and it scaling relatively quickly. And then knowing we had to pivot out of a COVID-based product because it wasn't going to last forever. And so, we had these wheels turning, and I think the one the one, at least to us, seemingly most obvious low-hanging fruit in grocery was pasta sauce. So I didn't expect to be selling pasta sauce for a living, but we were going to go into finance and ended up doing what we're doing now. So it's exciting.
But here you are. No, it's really exciting. So I guess was the aha moment looking across the grocery aisle first and seeing, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here in pasta sauce, just because there hadn't been much innovation on the product side, really hasn't been like maybe as many interesting flavors or even other types of sauce that you maybe couldn't find here, or wasn't kind of as recognized as marinara or others. And then going back to the kitchen and then started brewing your own pasta sauce. Was that kind of like the beginning?
Yeah, I think it was a culmination of a few things. Like we there definitely was that aha moment on shelf, or probably more so just a pain point that we'd felt in that it would be a difficult decision for us to choose a pasta sauce to buy, not by virtue of all of them exciting us, but kind of the opposite of that in a way. Like we couldn't choose because we couldn't effectively differentiate, right? Um, and so we found ourselves buying a lot of private label, and we'd go home and we'd find ourselves. And Winston was the cook, really. I'm not much of a cook, he is, but he would be doctoring the sauce up and he'd be adding to it. And it was like, well, you just bought a jarred sauce, but you spent 30 minutes working on it to make it a bit more exciting. And I think that was one of the pain points. The second kind of I would say influence for us, honestly, the Truff guys at the time, who, and I'll happily shout them out. The Knicks were like crushing, and of course they still are, and they always do. But um, they'd made 30 under 30. We saw Truff, and we felt like if Truff can do it in hot sauce, maybe there's a way that we can kind of follow the playbook of really innovating on brand and leading with brand and engaging a digitally native consumer in a category that it hadn't been done in. And it was funny, like 2 weeks later, Truff launched a pasta sauce. So we were almost we almost beat them to it. But it felt like to us there was a clear opportunity to carve out a really cheeky, fun, youthful, exciting brand identity, and then to pair it with flavors that we felt like we'd seen cross category almost everywhere. Like hot honey was on every pizza we'd ordered during COVID, but it was familiar enough for the consumer, not to necessarily need any sort of educational component in picking up product. Like it was, we joke that it's familiarly unfamiliar, right? We're pulling flavor profiles that have been seen by consumers in adjacent categories, but that haven't yet been applied in ours. And so I think the influence really that there might not have been a single aha moment. It was more so this buildup of one, an initial pain point, and two, like we just really felt like there was opportunity to innovate meaningfully both on brand and on product as looking at brand as kind of a means to more easily and effectively acquire a consumer, and then product to build this organic reacquisition system, right? And really get a consumer hooked you know, uh, upon first acquisition. And so, it was, I wouldn't say it was one single moment on shelf, but there were a lot of influences, both, even externally in the category and then in others.
Do do you find that that hot honey that was like maybe the single ingredient that was the differentiator? Obviously, it's all different, right? In terms of your recipe versus competitors. But was that kind of like for you all the what hadn't been experienced in hot in pasta sauce before, and that you thought that would be this would kind of bring like a fresh some freshness to it?
Yeah, we knew hot honey was the one. I think the first time we tried hot honey, we knew we were onto something. I remember we'd reached out to a food scientist and we'd said, "Hey, we got this idea. Can you make a hot honey marinara?" We called it hot honey arrabbiata at the time, and she said, "Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it'll turn out. I've never done it, but I can try." And she emailed us about a week and a half later and said, "You guys need to try this. It's really good." And the minute we had it, we knew. Like we knew we were onto something. And I joke that like hot honey marinara, whether a consumer likes it or not, they're never gonna forget it. Like it is the most unforgettable product in the category in my mind. And I think that's meaningful. Even again, if a consumer doesn't love it, like leaving that lasting impression and building experience in a way that we feel nobody else has in the category has been a huge, huge lift for us. So I think hot honey was definitely and still is really the hero SKU, but um, we've tried to continue to innovate outside of really just even hot honey was a huge trend at the time. It was we had no idea why nobody had done it, but um, now I think the balance on innovation is continuing to do just enough to be different and to excite, but not going too far. Like we're playing a little bit of a risky game in um, we are doing things that consumers haven't seen on shelf, and while they may not be educational, there's definitely inherent risk with innovating just a little bit too much, right? So hot honey was a great balance. Consumers love it. It works in LA and New York just as well, and actually really works better in the Midwest and mass market. So it's been a good one.
And people know what it is. It's not like people know what honey tastes like. They know as you say, you've seen hot honey work on other products, so why not in pasta sauce? Maybe it's having a moment, but people know what it is. What was in the process when you realized that you met with this food scientist, kind of got a bit more in terms of what you wanted your ingredient list and product to be? What was your process in terms of finding the right manufacturer and taste testing to make sure that the product was finalized or the best version that you thought it was?
Finding a manufacturer wasn't easy. It was probably the most difficult process pre-launch that we had to solve. I think there were two components that probably made it difficult. One is that, and I hear this from a lot of early stage founders, like onboarding initial manufacturing, really like a chicken and egg scenario, in that a manufacturer wants to see, this committed volume, but you can't have, of course, the volume if you don't have product, right? Like there's this really weird conundrum of like this paradigm of having to solve two issues that are like inextricably linked to each other, in that you can't have the volume without the manufacturing, but you can't really have the manufacturing early without guaranteeing the volume. And so that was a tough one. I think the flip side of it really was, we continue to be, and from the beginning, we were hyper obsessed with product, right? I feel like all of our success today has been downstream of really great product. And in that, we had delayed and delayed and delayed, and we would not go to market. We refused to go to market with product that we didn't feel was near perfect, with the assumption that it would only get better from there, right? And so, it was funny. I was at USC at the time. Winston and I were building, and I got a C plus on an accounting exam. And I went to my professor's office hours, and he said, "What's going on? Why aren't you performing in class?" And I said, "I'm building this pasta sauce brand." He said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah, I know it's a little bit weird, but," he said, "I've got the perfect guy for you to meet." And long story short, his closest buddy was a guy named Mike Shaw, who you might know. Mike Shaw is salt of the earth, one of the greatest. And I meet with Mike, and he says, for half an hour I meet with him, and he says, "What can I do for you? Anything I can do to help?" And I said, "Well, we got this co-packer who has ghosted me. I've sent him 120 emails. I think it was literally like 105 emails, and they would not respond. It was our only hope at going to market." And he said, "What's the co-packer's name?" And I told him, and he said, "One second." He pulled out his phone. He called the CEO. I had a plant tour the next day, and we were cooking 4 weeks later. So I think, honestly, in manufacturing, the value of networking
is huge.
Relationships are huge. And it was a really lucky break. I see Mike all the time still today, and we joke that, thank God I'd had a C plus. My parents might not have liked it, but without that C plus, I wouldn't have a co-manufacturer. We might not have a business.
I was about to say, thank goodness for that C plus. That's
Isn't
awesome.
that crazy? But I would say those were the two things. Like really convincing a co-manufacturer to bring product in and to cook product for us was a tough one. And the flip side of it was we did not want to rush to market. And so it made everything a little bit more difficult, in that product in our eyes had to be perfect.
Once you found the right co-manufacturer that could produce the product and you thought, okay, the product's finalized. This is exactly what a product like. But what were, I guess, in terms of the actual product itself, what is it? Is there any challenging parts to actually building the product itself? Like, is there, for example, ingredients that might be hard to source, or the actual production in terms of building the product, or is it actually not so bad in terms of the ingredients for the product?
Fortunately, what we have from a consumer-facing perspective is entirely different than anything the consumer has ever seen in the set. From on the manufacturing side, it isn't something that is necessarily difficult to manufacture, right? What we're doing is bringing readily available, and really like widely known ingredients to existing product, and that we're not fundamentally changing the manufacturing process. Our margin profile isn't necessarily sacrificed in any meaningful way, by virtue of us being innovative. And I think that was very lucky. It wasn't foresight. I can't take credit for that, but um, product is fundamentally unique from the consumer's perspective, and really, as like holistically looking at it, but and tasting it. But in terms of the manufacturing process, there isn't anything that is necessarily different in comparison to traditional marinara or a traditional arrabbiata, or a vodka sauce. And so we're very lucky in that sense. We're really innovating in a way that doesn't sacrifice a supply chain.
How did you first get into Erewhon, since they were your first retailer? And then also, how did you think about driving velocities, so you can obviously stay in shelf on Erewhon and also become like one of their best sellers in the category?
Yeah, it's funny, kind of similar to the phone call I received from the food scientist after she had landed that hot honey benchtop. We submitted to Erewhon, and they requested samples. And the minute they requested samples, we knew. We were like, we don't have a brand yet. We've got nothing. We didn't have a co-packer at the time, right? But we knew we had a really great product from a benchtop kitchen in LA. And the minute they tried product, they felt the same way. They approved it, and I was surprised, because as you know, Erewhon's competitive. It's really difficult. It's the place to see and be seen. It's as strong a marketing channel as it is, discovery, and even it can be a significant, for an early stage brand, revenue channel. And so it was a huge win for us, and it was all by virtue of product. We had like 30 Instagram followers. There was no brand at the time. There was just really good sauce, right?
That's awesome. And did Erewhon at all help you in terms of, okay, we have a great product here once you got into retail that we're going to help you drive it, or not at all?
Yeah, they were super supportive. I think, but the crazy thing about Erewhon is they don't really have to do much to like, just being at Erewhon as an early stage, newly launched brand was a huge catalyst, right? It put us on the map. There, consumers go to Erewhon for discovery. Creators, influencers, UGC content is oftentimes made at Erewhon, and then even buyers and category managers at other retailers are kind of looking many times to Erewhon for some innovation, right? So the Erewhon team was super supportive. They continue to be, but the magic of Erewhon sometimes is that kind of just being on that shelf as an early stage brand does incredible things to catalyze every element of the business.
How long did it take? Because you mentioned that you got into Erewhon, but you didn't even have the manufacturing kind of quite lined up at the time. Was that kind of like an oh crap moment? Because now they're going to be placing a PO at some point in the future, and now we have to actually get our contract manufacturing up. Were the timelines quite tight, or were they quite flexible in terms of when the first run would be?
Yeah, it was exactly as you described. Like, it took us, I think we were approved at Erewhon. It took us another like 6 months to actually land them product. And the buyer would email me, and I'd say, give us another month. Give me another couple of weeks. Give me another couple of weeks. And
Wow, and
finally,
they were willing
I
to
think
be
they'd almost Yeah, and I think they'd almost forgotten about us at one point, and I emailed and said, we're stocked with pod foods and we're ready to go, and we were full speed from there. But it was, and I think a lot of early stage is like that, right? You're almost you're having to do those things in uh, taking risk without necessarily having guarantees, and figuring it out as you go. Like that's kind of the name of the game early stage. It's like you you everything changes so quickly, and a brand is so dynamic when it's as young as a couple months old or 3 months old, that if you can unlock a win, you'll figure out how to make it work, but you get that win first.
How did you think about building the brand in different types of grocery, and as well as making sure that it was a price point that worked actually in different channels?
Yeah, I think from the beginning we felt like the last thing we wanted to do was to get caught in LA, New York, Miami, Chicago, and Dallas, right? We didn't want to build a brand that we felt couldn't scale, and that the whole premise of building, really, especially during COVID, was that we felt like our most enjoyable times during COVID and coming out of COVID were shared at the dinner table with friends or with family. And so we really wanted to be able to bring as many people together as possible over like this shared love of like risk taking and experiencing this like unexpected flavor profile in a pasta sauce. And so we knew we wanted to build a brand at conception that could perform, ideally maybe even is one that could perform better in the Midwest and the South in mass grocery than it would necessarily in natural. And even though I think the brand is inherently a somewhat better for you elevated food product that is going to, of course, need to command somewhat a premium, um, the goal for us was always to extend out of the coastal metro regions, and to build for the masses. And so when we think, when we really thought about, especially when the Target deal kind of came to fruition, um, the goal for us was to just continue to be hyper obsessed with product and building a brand that we knew could scale in a Whole Foods in SoCal just as well as it could in a Target in Toledo, right? Um, and I think on the flip side, we knew we had to be a little bit careful, like back to that kombu powder discussion on the umami pomodoro. Like we might not have been able to make umami pomodoro attainable enough from a price point and SRP perspective at a Target by virtue of it, having product that came from Japan. And so we've always tried to be as careful as possible in thinking about attainability and being as affordable, while of course not sacrificing quality of product in mass and really cross category. I mean cross channel, excuse me, in natural and in conventional. So, I would say we like to be we will not sacrifice quality in the name of cost. Like that's just one thing that we are hyper obsessed with product. We always will be, and that's what's, I think, resonated with consumers thus far. Um, but we're continually working, of course, to make the brand as attainable as possible always.
How do you think about driving trial in somewhere like Target, which for mass? Because of course, Erewhon, we talked about, a lot of people go there for discoverability, and it's a very trendy place to go. Target, I love shopping at Target, but I wouldn't. I don't know if I would say that Target is the most trendy of stores, nor is it trying to be. Although I think they have great ads, but and great greeting cards. I actually think they have like the best like birthday cards. Target's awesome. But besides my rant, what is like? How do you actually drive kind of a velocity on the mass side?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think one big thing for us has been that, you know, initially when we're placed in line, product is bright and it's colorful and it's different. And I think packaging actually does organically a lot to drive a consumer's attention. Um, Placement is very important. We launched on global side cap, and secondary placement is huge. I mean, the real estate game in retail, especially when you have a product that we feel stands out as much as ours does, is critically important, right? Like the day we launched in Target, I walked into a local Target here in LA, and it was a huge, huge super Target. And literally from the opposite end of the store, all the way down the aisle, I could see the side cap with the bright pink cracked pepper, the red hot honey marinara, and the yellow summer lemon. And it was like, that is incredible. Like the brand is recognizable from 100 yards away, right? It was crazy. But I think secondary placement has been a huge, huge lift for us early on. Um, but inline's not easy, right? I mean, we're going against a lot of brands that have decades of name recognition, have a lot more capital than we have. Um, they're household staples, right? And so to me, promo is important, effective. Circle deals and TPR is always something that is going to get the consumer to pull you off shelf. But the way we think about it in some ways too is that we have this fundamentally unique opportunity to not only engage the consumer in store and on shelf, but we feel like we have a leg up in understanding that we're bringing a new, younger, majority female consumer to the set that otherwise wouldn't be shopping the category. And I think we're able to engage that consumer with virality on TikTok, with really strong storytelling on social media. We joke that like we're a media brand in many ways, and I think the way we have to look at operating the business is like we're a media brand that happens to sell pasta sauce, right? Like our means of engagement actually is through content, and um, our medium is really pasta sauce. Like we can acquire and retain a consumer with great product, but initial acquisition and awareness is by virtue almost entirely, I think, of storytelling, right? And so if it's not in store, if it's not a consumer that's routinely shopping the category and walking the aisles, we're probably acquiring a consumer from TikTok or Instagram or a unique social media channel that otherwise we feel our competition isn't doing.
That makes a lot of sense. Just obviously having, an incredible social presence like you all do, in terms of driving that awareness and driving traffic to it, and also having a secondary placement in retail. Is that I'd imagine though that's pretty hard to do in terms of being a new brand in Target and be able to actually get a secondary placement in retail.
Yeah, it's not easy. We got really lucky in doing it. I know a lot of brands who have been in Target for a long time that to this day still have been kind of begging for off shelves and haven't yet gotten them, right? Um, I think it speaks to Target's excitement to bring us in. I mean, they took a gamble on us just as much as maybe we gambled on going into almost 2,000 stores, and um, we really we feel fortunate and appreciate Target's support so much because that was a huge means of discovery for a new young brand that frankly like like off shelves are expensive. TPR is expensive. Like we don't have we're venture backed, but we don't have the kind of capital to go and spend and spend and spend and try to outspend these you know, generational legacy brands. Like that's just not the game that we need to be playing, right? So I think really ideally having strong retail partners the way Target has supported us is what in many ways has been able to build some name recognition for us and brand equity on shelf and drive trial in a much more cost effective way than it otherwise would. But um, I think product a hyper obsession with product is really what does it for us. Like everything even at its core velocity is downstream of great product, right?
Totally, totally. Well, also kind of going back a little bit earlier, you were saying how I was suggesting that you were going very quickly at being at 5,000, nearly 5,000 stores in 12 months. You were kind of pointing out too, hey, we've actually also turned down a lot of retailers, and also at the same time, it's not like 1,000 independent stores that we've done. It's more so that we've been growing with one account or one retailer, throughout throughout their footprint nationally. I just want to say, what is the reason why, in terms of the stores that you've turned down, the reason why you've actually turned them down typically?
I think honestly a lot of it in recent months has been the fact that we we are almost at capacity. Like we're growing really quickly. We do have to extend, the manufacturing side of the business a bit. There's more output that needs to be had to continue to scale effectively. But um, I think honestly, really, the most of the accounts that we're in today had taken a risk on us, taken a bet early, and you know, Target we were talking to in February, right? And that was like newly out of Erewhon, not even yet in Whole Foods. And so I think a lot of the accounts that we're in today, Whole Foods and Target and HEB are primarily the ones that were willing to carry a conversation with us really early on and kind of saw the path, loved product, and felt that we could perform meaningfully on their shelves. And I think the accounts today that we maybe say no to, it's really by virtue of us not wanting to overextend and not necessarily being able to, right? Like there's only so much pressure I can put on a supply chain that hasn't yet been pressure tested. Like our supply chain is a year old. It's not. I I'm I think in many ways it's a hedge against risk to keep additional distribution narrow. We're really grateful for all the excitement, but at the same time, like we have to be hyper focused on driving velocity and validating the data story today. And so it's difficult as a founder to be disciplined in door count growth. But I think primarily the main reasons of wanting to stay lean and not grow too quickly and overextend are to ensure that supply chain is ready and to really continue to test and build a data story and understand our consumer and understand how to continue to iterate on product in a way that then prepares us for additional growth, right? So it's a mixture of a few things, and there's a handful of things at play, but it's really just not wanting to assume too much risk and to wanting and wanting to really be able to support partners when we say yes. I don't want to say yes and then disappoint a retail partner, right? I really want to be sure that we can allocate spend and perform and drive velocity in a way that we know we can if the time is right.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, also on product innovation, because of course you kind of have two things. You have, obviously your store expansion, and then you have to commit to actually inventory for those stores and actually service those accounts. And then as well, you also have SKU expansion. You're now at 5 SKUs, going from 2 to 5. When does it make sense for you, or how do you and Winston think about when does it make sense to actually bring on another SKU? And even how do you focus on kind of launching that SKU as well?
We pay close attention to the data. We really do allow the data to direct. I think the funny thing about, and I guess the unique perspective we hold, is that we can follow the data, but the data will show us what's moving and what's not moving. But given we try to be as innovative as we can, there's not really data that will tell us, is hot honey going to work in the set, right? But I think we really like to consider, one, what our consumer feedback says and what we're hearing from consumers. A lot of consumers, like we're launching 2 new SKUs in Whole Foods in January, and there are 2 SKUs that consumers have wanted, and we've heard it again and again and again. And so we're gonna run with it, right? 2 things that in the set that nobody's really doing and nobody has done, but we're willing to assume that risk to continue to drive incremental velocity, right? And so I don't, there's not, and maybe it's not so. We really just trust our gut and listen a bit to the data if we can. I think the data is kind of points us in the direction, and then the real ideation comes from, me and Winston sitting around a table and discussing what we think our consumers want and what we hear our consumers saying they want, right? So it's I would say it's data driven to an extent, but we really trust our gut. Um, I think our like intuitively we feel like our instincts generally kind of speak to our consumer, and so we kind of just decide and pull the trigger on new SKUs and SKU expansion when we feel the time might be right and when the consumer's ready.
Got it. No, thanks so much for all this, Troy. I really appreciate it. I have one more question for you. What do you value more, $100 of COGs, so $100 of SAUZ as COGs, not as, the retail price, but the inventory price that you're paying for the inventory, or $100 cash?
Oh, in COGs, of course. In COGs.
Yeah.
Of course.
Love it.
If you could give that to me today, Mike, I will love you forever.
Love it.
We're working on it.
Love it, Troy. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're the best. I appreciate you having me.
And there you have it. It was awesome having Troy on the podcast. And I must say, I'm a huge fan of their company, Sazh. It's absolutely delicious pasta. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. Again, we're MFD. We help brands on the inventory side when it comes to operations or financing their growth. Check us out at manufacturer.com. We also throw events around the country every month. So check them out at manufacturer.com/events in order to help bring the community together. Thanks for listening.